welcome to Self-Storage Made Simple. I am your host, Thaddeus Campbell from Safe Storage USA. Incredibly proud to be joined today by someone I consider a very close friend. We shared a pretty substantial journey in our lives together. Not only do we share the self-storage industry, but have been on a pretty significant health journey that he supported me so graciously on. Very, very proud to call him a friend and happy to bring him on to the Self-Storage Made Simple podcast. Matt Wess, thank you so much for joining us. Before I let you talk, I'm just going to give people a little idea. If you don't know Matt, he's been in the self-storage industry for 15 plus years, was a major player for one of the big REITs in their acquisitions department, has decided that it was time for him to move on and do things on his own, and excited to see what that journey brings. But very few people who we can bring on the podcast that have the wealth of knowledge about this industry and the involvement in high-level deals that Matt's had over the last 15 years. So, Matt, thank you so much for taking a little time out of your day to come and join us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Thaddeus. Appreciate it.
I also want to thank you for closing the blinds. Matt happens to live in Denver, Colorado, which is one of my favorite places in the world. His view out of his window as I'm sitting in New Jersey and it's gloomy and cold is the Rocky Mountains. So he was kind enough not to rub it in today and take care of me a little bit by not rubbing salt in my wounds.
Not only is it the Rocky Mountains, but it's always sunny and beautiful here.
All right, I did say thank you, and you just had to rub it in anyway. I was trying to be nice, and you had to go and just dig into the wound.
But there's no more room for people left here. Nobody else is moving to Denver, okay?
You wish that was the case. Yeah. They just move up north and hang out with Dion in Boulder, right?
That's true. Well, it's good for self-storage in Denver, that's for sure.
Yeah, amen. A crazy market and seems to be a centerpiece for whatever reason. Denver seems to be a pretty big centerpiece for a lot of the big players in the storage industry.
Yeah, there are a lot of owner operators, both small, medium, and large groups that have their home base based here in Denver. And there's probably a handful that I don't even know about, frankly. So
yeah. So listen, as I always do on the podcast, I always try and go back to the beginning. We're going to talk a little bit about our health journey and specifically your health journey in the next half hour. But I want you to take me back to how the heck did you end up in real estate and how did you get into self-storage specifically? Take me a little bit on that journey.
Yeah, so I got into self-storage via my wife at the time. She just put in a lot of time at the company that I worked for previously, and I just fell in love with it. Got introduced to one of my mentors who taught me everything that I know about underwriting. I didn't know anything at the time. I was green, and I just buckled down. For me, it's a relationship business, and I go out there, with you, Thaddeus, here. I build relationships and I build rapport with people. The numbers all come later, but relationships are key, in my opinion. That's got me into the industry. It's the great people in the industry. I love it. So
it's interesting you said that so early in the podcast because rarely, I think I'm in the 60s now of people I've interviewed on the podcast over the last couple of years. And at least 40 to 50 of them, the topic of self-storage and the kindness, the camaraderie, the interaction that's just, from my experience in other industries I've worked in, so rare. It's such an outlying industry in that sense. What do you think about storage makes it so that people are just willing to be share information, be kind to people that otherwise might be seen as a competitor?
That's a great question. I think it's self-storage for the longest time was kind of flew under the radar. It wasn't a glamorous industry, and everyone's kind of struggled to get new developments out of the ground. That's where I think a lot of the camaraderie and groups among friends have gotten together and have shared information. That being said, also a lot of the data in self-storage, because it wasn't a glamorous industry, years back, we would always be lagging on data or products or software. they were always geared more towards the other asset groups that are a lot more glamorous, and people thought were better investments for whatever reason. I can't tell you the number of friends that I've made in the self storage industry that are still very close friends today. It's oftentimes I don't see them, but at trade shows, they'll call when they're in Denver and I'll meet up. But it's the amount of friends and what they'll do for me or what I'll do for them is pretty remarkable.
I have to absolutely echo that. And I'm listen, I'm only in this industry less than 3 years, but even in that short span have seen that, so become such a it's just shocking to me. I worked in a couple of industries that it was you were just as likely to get punched in the face by somebody as to get them to help you with something. So it's been a definite positive. So I want to dig in now. I don't think it's a secret. You were the acquisitions lead for NSA REIT, which is, I think, right now the fourth largest, maybe
Yep.
competing with CubeSmart in the for the 3 and 4 spot. Now that Life Storage has combined with Extra Space, talk to me a little bit. I know you talked about relationships and how important that was, but you did a lot of deals for them. What was kind of the process for you of bringing so many new facilities into their ownership group?
Well, it goes back to the days when Secure Care was one of the founding pros of NSA. That's who I started my career with. And that was I have the experience of working from a small private operator with institutional JVs now to a public REIT, and I think it goes to the leadership of the Secure Care and NSA, which Secure Care and NSA were both founded by Arlen Nordhagen, and I think being that it is a relationship business and doing what you say you're going to do um, has has given myself credibility in the industry that I didn't have coming into the industry. They had already built that and put that in place, and over time, you transact and you perform and you execute, and that's what has allowed myself to be so successful both at Secure Care and carried into NSA.
And I know that you made a life decision here recently where, it's time for Matt Wess to go out and do Matt Wess's thing. Take me into the mindset of that a little bit. Like, that takes a lot of guts when you're working for, what is the fourth largest player in the industry, and you're willing to just say, hey, you know what? Now it's time for me to go on and do something on my own.
It was a big decision. The leadership there were like family to me. My girls grew up knowing Dave Kramer, the CEO of NSA and previous COO and CEO of Secure Care. So it was a hard decision. But at the same time, I look back and I liked working for a smaller company. I really enjoyed that. Really, small incremental gains at a smaller company are much larger than a large gain at a large company. A gain meaning portfolio size acquisition. And I enjoyed the small incremental gains. And it was just it's a lot more. I wouldn't say nimble, but agile. To work for a smaller organization.
That ability, especially in market like, and we'll talk about this maybe a little bit, but beginning of or middle of 2022, really the beginning of 2023 till now, even still, not been the easiest time in the self storage acquisitions world. Talk to me a little bit about how challenging it's been for the last year. And the reason I thought of this question is you talked about nimble and how important it's been to pivot in the last year as really the landscape has changed so remarkably.
Yeah, I mean, you look at number four largest owner operator in the country at NSA. Um, they were facing challenges just like any other small operator. Your cost of capital is increasing. You get pressure from the stock price. Our peers, their peers' stock fell. Inherently, NSA's model is more complicated, and I think right or wrong, they get penalized more on the stock price, which then gives pressure to cost of capital. And it gets harder to buy. You have to be a lot more cautious, a lot more conservative on deals that you look at, and rightfully so. And at a certain point, you have to look at how much is this, how accretive is this acquisition versus the belief in the stock price. As why not just buy back stock? And that's what NSA has been doing, and I think it's a wise decision for a deal junkie like myself. I don't get the deal. I don't get the deals and the deal highs that I get from acquiring properties that they do buying the stock back. So
Literally stole my next question from me. We've talked about this idea of you being a deal junkie and how, as NSA started to grow and your role, especially in the last year and a half, as deals have been a little less transactive. There hasn't been as many going on. How excited are you to get back into that situation where you really are not dealing so much with stock price and having to kind of be an actuary or a bookkeeper, but really just get to go talk to people and talk about deals.
yeah, I mean it's going to be it'll be great to get back into the game. That said, a smaller or private operator is going to be met with different challenges as well. So it's not going to be that I don't have the stock price pressure anymore, or because of that, cost of capital is not going to be any different. It's going to have challenges. You're going to have to look at groups that are a little bit more aggressive on buying, that want to and have to still transact. So it's not going to be easier by any means. It'll just be that personally, I'll be able to interact and transact and have those conversations, that I can have with owner operators and brokers along the way.
All right, I'm going to dig a little bit now. You've told me two things already that are super important to you in a deal. One of them being that it's relationships, right? Building that relationship with capital. The other thing you mentioned was the importance of credibility, right? Doing what it is you said you were going to do and coming through in the way that you promised somebody you were going to come through. Give me three more things that make doing a deal work, like things that somebody's really got to concentrate on if they're going to be doing deals, whether it's in self-storage or any other real estate asset class. What are some key things from Matt West that make a transaction possible and as smooth as it's possible to be?
So one of them is kind of related to this, but not at the same time, and that is the best deal is oftentimes the deal that you pass. Like as you're going through the underwriting process, you're looking at all the financials. You could stretch on the deal, but if there are other variables, demographics, new competition coming in, you've got to look at those as well. You've got to factor that into the equation. And yeah, sometimes the best deal is the deal you're going to pass on. Number two, I guess, would be, let's say you get a deal under LOI, you're working towards the purchase and sale agreement, you get it signed. Communication, I mean, is going to be key throughout the due diligence process. Always be upfront, always be open, and deliver news, whether it's good or bad news, as quickly as you get it.
Love that.
That's going to add to the credibility. That's going to build your relationship. I mean, all those things go back to relationships, in my opinion. But the communication there is going to be key. Um, Third, let me think of the
I was going
third
to
one.
ask you something while you think about the third one. I wanted to
Yeah.
dig in. How hard is it to balance the idea that you have to do deals eventually to stay alive, right? You're the acquisitions guy. Whether it's NSA REIT and they're more concentrating in the short term on buying back stock or buying new deals, in the long term, there has to be deals bought or they don't exist. So, how do you kind of balance this idea of, hey, there's some deals I really got to walk away from with I got to transact or there's not a business for me to have in the long term.
let me answer that one. I have the third one. I'll answer that question after the third
Love
one.
it. Go to it.
The third one, I think, is critical. Is you have to have an attorney that is not a deal killer.
Got it.
That one is, I don't know how many times that, you know, the attorneys that we worked with were fantastic. They understand the benefits, or they understand the business transaction as well, not just the legal.
Yep.
And they aren't constantly going to get into a battle with the other attorney, just to battle or
Been
just to
there
get
and dealt
fees.
with that where two egos got going with the lawyers and it killed the deal. It's not a fun thing to be a part of.
That is true. So to answer your question, you just talked about, deal volume, goals. Um, Honestly, at both Secure Care and NSA, we didn't have a lot of pressure as it relates to what our goals are for the year. It's been communicated to the street at NSA that they would like to acquire 10% of asset value per year on average. The nice thing about that is, and a lot of people lose sight of, is the on average part. We're not going to have to grow at that rate at every single year. For example, 2021 over 2 billion in acquisitions, that'll carry them for a while,
Yeah.
frankly. So it was nice not having the pressure, but at the same time, I think with everything in a pipeline and relationships that are built over years. I mean, I could be working with a seller for 5 years and not have anything to do with them as it relates to buying a property. On the sixth, seventh, eighth year, they give me a call and they're like, "I'm ready to transact," and that's when it happens. So, just building that pipeline and maintaining it, it takes time. So anyone just getting into the space, just keep after it. Um, it'll
You,
come.
you
Uh,
reminded me of one of my early mentors in real estate always used to drive into my head that the money's in the follow up, right? It's
yep.
not the first interaction. Sometimes it's the 10th, the 15th, the
Yeah.
20th, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. So I'm going to dig a little. You said a number that is just, for most of us, well, first, certainly before I got into commercial real estate, never even really contemplated the number. $2 billion worth of acquisitions in one calendar year. It's almost mind boggling for somebody that doesn't deal with that type of number ever to hear. What was it like to be involved in $2 billion of acquisitions?
Well, first of all, I credit the structure of NSA. In each of their pros have their own acquisition team, whether that be the principal themselves that are also deal junkies, or a senior junior underwriter. Um, so they're out there working on acquisitions. The inherent structure of NSA and the pro model is beneficial as well, where they have a captive pipeline of assets that the pros manage, or control. There is some level of, let's say, it's a debt maturity that hasn't happened yet, as to why it's not into the REIT. It could be a minority interest
Got it.
that the pros have,
Yep.
and that is definitely benefited NSA to get towards that $2 billion number. I didn't contribute everything to that $2 billion number. It was a lot of other pros and pipeline that added to that as well. So
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note for people that don't know, NSA is like a conglomerate of a bunch of different brands and a bunch of different owners that kind of pool everything into. If I'm not totally off base, feel free to fix me, Matt. But it's not one company owning everything. An amalgam of companies that sort of pool their resources into the REIT. And I thought that was very interesting to say. Some of the companies involved in the REIT can't put all their assets in it at a given time, but over
yeah.
time, as things change, they're able to add and sort of makes that automatic pipeline. That's kind of an interesting point. I'm going to shift gears now a little bit because I promised I was going to talk about this with you, and I want to bring it up. A few years ago, you found yourself in a place where you stepped on a scale and you just didn't like what you see. And I want to pick your brain a little bit because I want to know and you can tell the numbers and where you were at and where you're at now. I think if there's, I don't have a before picture. If you want to send one to me, I'll have Eric put it into the podcast and people can see it. But for people that knew you before and see you now, your transformation's been nothing short of unbelievable, right? Like literally wouldn't recognize who the person was. What is it that drove you to make this incredible change in your health in your life?
It was multiple things. I 12 and a half years ago. You're right. I stepped on the scale, and actually, let me step back. It was 12 and a half years ago that I stopped drinking alcohol altogether. Um, that was first step. For a little while there, I substituted sugar for my alcohol consumption. That didn't fare well. I still love sugar, but I just don't partake as much as I did in the past. But I stepped on the scale. I was about 282 pounds, and my girls were pretty young at the time. Almost two and a half, and probably just being born, honestly, or not born yet. And I realized that I wasn't in a good space to possibly be there for a long term for the girls. Um, I didn't really think that my health was that bad until I actually started and working out and losing weight. What I did at the very beginning was I started with a lot of cardio. I didn't enjoy cardio. I knew it was the quickest. I'm a quick fix kind of guy. I jumped on the cardio very quickly, and that helped a lot. I did simple things like MyFitnessPal, where I tracked all of my macros on a daily basis, and that's where you really realize, okay, like what I was consuming food wise was just absolutely insane. And you start paring that back. And it's not easy to pare it back right from the very beginning. But you start paring it back, you're like, okay, this is what normal portion sizes are. Or I can pare things back and have a cheat day and have that sugar that I want. It so fast forward to today. I jumped on the scale this morning. I was 190 pounds. So I don't even know what my body fat percentage was when I was at my peak. I
Yeah.
don't even want to know. But today it's below 15. I'll tell you that. It's been a great journey. I feel healthier. I'm 45 years old and I feel 35, frankly.
Oh, that's so awesome to hear. And just to add to this story, I started my health journey January 1 of 2022. I was 279.7. I sort of got scared by the threat of 280. I never stepped on the scale and saw 280, although there were probably a few times in there where I was over 280. In May of that year, I happened to be out in Denver. Matt and I had very little interaction at that point. I think I might have spoken to you once or twice in my
Hmm.
previous role and talking to you at NSA. But you really had no reason to reach out to me and saw I was going to be in Denver from a post I made, reached out to me. We ended up having lunch out there. And honestly, man, I was at a point in my health journey where it was getting really rough, and having you step in and just share your journey with me and be there for me going forward. And we've since, communicated significantly more and spent a fair amount of time at various trade shows and whatnot. I just wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart because you had no reason to do that. But it meant a lot on this side. I'm 50. And same thing, like, hey, you're starting to see the reality of the fact that life isn't guaranteed to you anymore, right? There's no promise. So really appreciate you having been involved in that way, and will always mean the world to me. So I appreciate that.
I also want to say thank you and let you know how appreciative I am of your journey. You do a much better job and are much more eloquent at posting videos and posting comments about, while you're working out. There are days that I've struggled that I wake up in the morning and, you're 2 hours ahead of me and you've got your morning workout and I pull up Facebook or Instagram, and there's Thaddeus working out and getting after it at 5:30 in the morning, and it's 5:30 now my time, and I have a decision to make. I can either go back to sleep for an hour more, or might as well just get up and do like Thad's doing and get there and get it done. So thank you as well. You're a big part of
Appreciate
that.
that, man. For whatever reason, I was born as a talker, and I like to put my story out there. And quite frankly, one of the big reasons I put my story out there is because it's accountability for me, right? I keep putting my story out there, and people like you keep telling me they're watching. It forces me at 4:30 when my alarm goes off to be like, I got to get up because somebody out there is going to be waiting for me to post this story, and I don't want to let them down. So it raises my level too, and I think this is important. It's what you talked about before about relationships and community and how it all sort of comes back to help everyone involved. So appreciate that, and thank you for the kind words. We're getting to the point. I try and keep this to 30 minutes to honor my guest time, to honor the listeners' time, to make it as digestible as possible as a podcast. I always tell people if you have the ability to turn it on 2 times speed, you know, I don't sound as good in squirrel mood. I don't sound like Alvin and the Chipmunks, but you can get the content that much quicker. What I want to ask you, Matt, is I know that you're out there, you have access to deals, you have such a great network in the self-storage industry. If there's people out there who'd like to reach out to you directly and maybe kind of pick your brain about stuff they're doing, what's the best way for somebody to get a hold of Matt Wess?
Best way, probably my personal email address. Email's great. We can post that later.
We'll put that. You'll actually be seeing it on the screen right now as we host the podcast. So that's pretty easy to do.
And I'll give you my preference on email, and I'm happy to talk. I've had some phone conversations earlier today with a group that is thinking about getting into self storage. They reached out via LinkedIn, so that's another option. LinkedIn's always good. So either one.
Love it. Listen, I'm going to go back and once again say thank you so much for the time. We're going to have to do this again someday down the road. I
Yes.
didn't get to all the questions that I had set up to ask you, but certainly was an awesome conversation. I hope if you're watching this, I hope you had a pen and paper and wrote down the things that Matt shared about the keys to a successful acquisition strategy, because I was talking about this yesterday with someone, and slow death in real estate happens when nobody's communicating with you because they don't want to do business with you anymore. And you don't even realize when it's happening. But Matt's keys were so poignant about how to have a great acquisition. And what happens is when you follow that, you're going to keep getting a pipeline of people coming to you for the way that you dealt with. So I hope that you had a pen and paper. You wrote down some of the incredibly insightful comments that he made. Matt, look forward to getting together again soon. I hope that you're going to be
Yes.
out on the East Coast for the SSA show in March. We'll see each other soon, one way or the other. That is it for today's episode of Self Storage Made Simple. Again, I'm your host, Thaddeus Campbell. I am always looking for deals. So if you have deals, reach out. I'm looking for existing properties. I'm looking for raw land. Don't be afraid. You're going to see my social media handles, all the different ways you can get in touch with me. We'll see you guys next time.